Good evening, students. My name is Rohit, and today we are going to start a new chapter, and the name of the chapter is Emergency Provision. But before starting this chapter, we will first of all discuss the unitary features of the Constitution. Yesterday, in the last class, we discussed that what were the federal features of the Constitution. Now we will discuss about the unitary features of the Constitution, and only then we will start with emergency provisions. So let us first discuss the unitary features of the Constitution. See, while studying the salient features of the Constitution, we discussed that one of the feature of the Constitution was federal system with unitary bias. It means so far structure is concerned, we are federal in nature because we have two government, one at the center and the second in the states. But when it comes to the power distribution of power, more powers are given to the center, and this particular thing has been borrowed from Canadian Constitution. So what are the unitary features of the Constitution? The first unitary feature of the Constitution is a strong center. Now why I am saying strong center? See, in the last class we have discussed that the distribution of power is mentioned in the 7th schedule. Now in 7th schedule you will find three lists: union list, state list and concurrent list. Now remember, when it comes to the distribution of subjects, these subjects are those on which government has the authority to make laws. So if you compare the number of subjects, more number of subjects are in the union list, and that too important of national concern. The subjects which are of regional concern are placed in the state list, and in concurrent list again, if there is a conflict between the law of center and the state, then the central law shall prevail. So more number of subjects are placed under the union list. This is the first proof that the center is strong because it has more number of subjects. And second, important subjects, for example, defense, railways, nuclear, banking, all these important sectors are under the union list. Second, Parliament has the authority to make laws on a state list, but this particular thing will be discussed separately because this is a separate feature under unitary features, that Parliament has the authority to make laws on a state list. But when it comes to concurrent list, in case, as I discussed earlier, in case of conflict between the central and state law, the central law shall prevail. This again shows that center is more powerful. And one more thing, those subjects which are not mentioned in any of these lists, those subjects are known as residuary subject, and the power to make laws on such subject is vested in the Parliament. So because of this distribution of power, we can rightly say that in according to our constitution, the center is more powerful compared to states. Okay, and there is one more proof under Article 3 of the Constitution. Yes, good evening everyone. Under Article 3 of the Constitution, the Parliament has the power to change the name of the state, alter the boundaries of the state, to increase the area of the state, to decrease the area of the state, or to create a new state by separating a territory from any state. So all these things can be done without the consent of the state. As we discussed earlier, that under Article 3, the consent of a state is not at all required. So the Parliament has the authority to do whatever it wants to do with the state. Okay. So this is the proof that why the center is more powerful than the states. And this thing has been borrowed from Canadian Constitution. Now the second unitary feature is states not indestructible. See, again, in order to understand this, we need to see what is Article 3. Right now I discussed that under Article 3, without the consent of states, the Parliament can do whatever it wants to do with these states under Article 3. So it is under Article 3 that a particular state can be destroyed. Suppose if I merge Bihar into Uttar Pradesh, then the state of Bihar is gone. Now there is no more Bihar, but the size of Uttar Pradesh has increased. So that is why I always say in the class that our allegiance should be always to a country, towards a country and not towards a state. Okay. So states not indestructible means states can be destroyed by the Parliament. Okay, even if a state does not want to break itself, but then also the parliament has the authority to divide the state. Now the third feature is single constitution. See, in our country we only have one constitution, and that is the Constitution of India. In that same constitution we have the provision for the central government and for the state government. Under part 5th of the constitution, central government is established, and under part 6 of the constitution, state government is established. So the same constitution provides for the establishment of central government as well as state government. It means states do not have their own constitution. There are many countries where there are two separate constitutions, one for the center and the other for the state. See, in India, what happened during the time when Jammu Kashmir was the state? At that time, Jammu Kashmir had its own constitution. We all know that Jammu Kashmir had its own constitution. So that was a federal feature, state having its own constitution. But after 2019, Jammu Kashmir was relegated to the status of union territory, which never happened in our country. So the single constitution provides for part 5th and part 6th, central and state government. And remember, the same constitution provides for the establishment of state government, but the state government do not have the authority. The state governments do not have the authority to amend the constitution. The constitution can be amended only by the parliament, but the same constitution provides for the establishment of state government. So states, only in one case, states can initiate the amendment of the constitution, and that is under article 169 of the constitution. Under article 169 of the constitution, if any state passes the resolution by special majority, then the parliament can pass a bill for creation or abolition of legislative council. So because under article 169, it is mentioned that a legislative council can be established or abolished in a state only when the state legislature passes a resolution in that regard. Okay, so we have a single constitution, but the power to amend this constitution is with the center. Now, another feature, another unitary feature is single citizenship. Now, compare this with United States of America. In United States of America, there is the concept of dual citizenship. Dual citizenship means you have two citizenship. First is of the nation and the second is of the state. So every citizen in United States has two citizenship. First, he is American citizen, and the second, the citizen of the state where he belongs. So in India, we do not have the concept of double citizenship. We have single citizenship. It doesn't matter where you were born. I mean, whether you are from Assam, Bihar, Jammu, Kashmir, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, it doesn't matter. You are an Indian. Okay. So that is why we have Indian citizenship. We do not have state citizenship. And it is actually good, because in our country at present, what you are witnessing, that on the basis of language, people are fighting. Say, you must have seen what is happening in Maharashtra. For those who are not able to speak in Marathi, they are either harassed or beaten by the public, not public, a particular group. Then the same thing is happening in the southern India. There you will again find the dispute over the language. If you're not able to speak that language, then they are either going to harass you or what all. So this is happening at present in a country, and this is happening when we have single citizenship. It doesn't matter whether you are from North India, South India, or from Northeast. At the end, you are going to be an Indian citizen, but still we are fighting over such trivial matters. Yes, this is a trivial matter, fighting over the language. And when we Indians face discrimination in some other country, then we all feel that yes, we Indians face discrimination. But in our country, we are facing discrimination. If you go to any other part of the state, any other part of the country, then you will feel that there is discrimination. So in India, you will find discrimination. And when we feel discriminated in other country, then we start protesting against it. But in our own country, we are discriminated against one another, either on the ground of religion or on the ground of language. Lately, the issue of language has again came to the forefront, and now again there is a dispute over the language. Now, after single citizenship, we have flexible constitution. Flexible constitution. Now remember, we all know Indian constitution is rigid as well as flexible. Rigid constitution is a federal feature, whereas flexible constitution is a unitary feature. Flexible constitution means the provision of the constitution can be amended easily. When I say the provision can be amended easily, it simply means we are able to amend the provision of the constitution by using simple majority. It is simpler to achieve simple majority. Why? Simple majority means majority of the members present and voting in the house. Whereas in a special majority, it is majority of the total membership of the house and majority of not less than 2/3 of the members present and voting in the house. So majority provisions of the constitution can be amended by simple majority. There are only few provisions which can be amended by special majority, but majority of the provisions are amended under the special majority. Okay. Now the flexible constitution is the unitary feature. Now sixth is all India services. Now how we can relate all India services with the unitary feature of the constitution? Why we are saying all India services is a feature of unitary system? Because see, in India we have three all India services. The first is IAS, Indian Administrative Services. The second is Indian Police Service, and the third is Indian Forest Service. Okay, there's a difference between Indian Foreign Service and Indian Forest Service. Indian Foreign Service is a central service, whereas Indian Forest Service is an all India service. Now what is the difference between the central service and all India service? See, the central government conducts examination for these services. The central government is responsible for giving them training. Their appointment is done by the central government. So ultimately central government is having control over these services, but their service is not utilized only by the center. They render their services to the state as well as center. For example, IAS is appointed by the president. Okay, so IAS is appointed by the president. Central government gives him training, but at the end he is going to give his training. He is going to render his service to both. To the states, he is appointed as collector. Okay, collector, chief secretary. Okay, so SDM. So as SDM, collector, chief secretary, he is giving his services to the state, and the same IAS officer could be appointed as the secretary to the government of India. So the same officer is going to give his services to the center as the secretary to the government of India, joint secretary, some director, that director. So these are appointed by the central government, but they are also giving their services to the state. For example, IPS. President has appointed IPS, but he is appointed as SP, then IG, DIG. He is giving his service to the states despite being a central government officer. Okay, so why we are saying all India service is a unitary feature? Because the central government is having control over these services. The central government decides when they are to be promoted, when their transfer should be done. All these things are in the hands of center. Okay, center is the ultimate authority, not the states. So that is why they are giving their services to the state, but they are under the control of center. So that is why it comes under the unitary feature. Now seventh is appointment of governor. Seventh is appointment of governor. Now remember, governor is the head of the state. Governor is the head of the state. Now, in each and every state, governor is appointed by the president. But governor is the head of the state. So, what president does at the center, the same thing is going to be done by the governor at the level of a state. But the governor is appointed by the president. So ultimately he is under the control of the president, that is central government. So it is through governor that center somehow tries to exercise control over the state. Because under Article 200, the governor has the authority to reserve a bill for the consideration of the president. If this happens, then the president, that is the center, is going to intervene. Then the central government through the president shall decide what needs to be done on the bill of a state. Okay, so governor is the tool through which sometimes center tries to bargain with the states. So appointment of governor is in the hand of center. Then the eighth feature is no equality of state representation. No equality of state representation. Now what it means? No equality of state representation simply means, see, compare this with USA. In United States, there are total 50 states, and in their upper house, there are total 100 seats. Their upper house is known as Senate and our upper house is known as Rajya Sabha. So in their upper house, which is Senate, they have 100 seats and total 50 states. So it doesn't matter whether the state is big or small. All states have equal representation. Now this is a sign of true federal structure, that all states are given equal weightage. Okay, all states have equal weightage because it doesn't matter whether you are a small state or big state, all states are going to get equal seats in the upper house. So 100 seats, 50 states, each and every state is going to get 2 seats in the Senate. Okay, but in India it is not the case. In India what happens? In India, in Rajya Sabha, the states have representation, but the representation is based upon the population of the state. So that is why the highest representation is given to the Uttar Pradesh because of its population. Uttar Pradesh have 31 seats in the Rajya Sabha, whereas some small states, for example Goa, then Sikkim, these all states have 1 or 2 seats in the Rajya Sabha. So why this is happening? It is all because of the what I call no equality of state representation. In India we have representation only on the basis of population. So bigger states have bigger representation while small states have lesser representation. Okay, so I hope this thing is clear why we are saying no equality of state representation. In Rajya Sabha the seats are distributed on the basis of population. So now the next feature will be our next chapter for this day, and that will be emergency provisions. So I'm not going to discuss anything about emergency provisions because we are going to discuss emergency provision after the completion of unit 3 features. Okay, so let us leave this. Now the 10th feature is this, we have already discussed, Parliament's authority over state list. Parliament's authority over state list. Now, you know, in the last class, yesterday I have discussed this, that under abnormal circumstances, the parliament has the authority to make laws on a state list. And I also discussed those abnormal circumstances. The first abnormal circumstances was during national emergency, the parliament has the authority to make laws on a state list. The second abnormal circumstances during the president rule. Third is when 2 or more states request parliament to make law on a particular state subject. Fourth is when Rajya Sabha under Article 249 passes a resolution, then parliament can make a law on a state subject. Then the fifth is in order to execute or in order to implement an international agreement, then if the parliament wants to make a law on the state list, then yes, the parliament has the authority to make a law on a state list for implementing international agreement. So these are the abnormal circumstances when the parliament gets the authority to make a law on a state list. So these all conditions are discussed in this heading. Then 11th feature is we have integrated judiciary. Why integrated judiciary? We do not have separate judiciary for the center and for the state. I mean, for central law we do not have separate judiciary, for states law we do not have separate judiciary. We have a single unified judiciary, where Supreme Court is at the top, below you will find her High Court, and below this you will find lower court. Okay, and all these courts are unified. Why I am saying unified? The judgment of lower court can be challenged in High Court, whereas the judgment of High Court can be challenged in Supreme Court. And one more thing, the direction of Supreme Court is binding on all the courts. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether whether it's a state High Court, for example Allahabad High Court. Yes, Allahabad High Court is in Uttar Pradesh, but it has to follow the directives of Supreme Court, because according to the constitution, the direction of the Supreme Court is binding on all the courts. Okay, so it doesn't matter where the court is present, Supreme Court is at the top. So we have a unified judiciary. Then the 12th is integrated audit machinery. Integrated audit machinery. Okay, basically audit means to check the accounts, khaton ki जांच करना. Okay, so here the reference is to CAG. See, CAG is Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Let me write the full form. Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Okay, so CAG is appointed by the President. CAG is removed by the Parliament. So the central government has the control over the CAG. In reality, the central government has the control. However, the CAG is an independent constitutional body. Ideally, it is not under the control of any government, but still, let us not discuss this. But the fact is, CAG is appointed by the President, and to a certain level, the central government commands control over the office of CAG. Yes, the central government, to some extent, through the process of appointment, commands control over the office of CAG. But this CAG is responsible not only for auditing the account of center, but also the accounts of state. So the same CAG is responsible for auditing the account of central government as well as the state government. So CAG audits the account of state government, but state's government do not have any say in his appointment, in his removal. Okay, everything is in the hand of center, but he is auditing the account of state as well. So states do not have their separate CAG for auditing their account. No, there is no such provision. Now the 13th is integrated election machinery. Integrated election machinery. Now it means we have Election Commission of India, and remember, again, like CAG, the members of election, see, there are total 3 members in election commission. First is Chief Election Commissioner, and remaining 2 are Election Commissioner. These election commissioners are appointed by the President. Again, they are removed by the President. But the Election Commission is responsible for conducting election not only to the Parliament but also to the states. Okay, so the elections to the Parliament and to the state legislature are conducted by the Election Commission of India. So this Election Commission is somehow under the control of center, and this Election Commission is responsible for conducting elections to the Parliament as well as state legislature. So yes, you should not be confused with State Election Commission. Yes, apart from Election Commission of India, there is a State Election Commission, but that State Election Commission is not responsible for conducting elections to the state legislature. State Election Commission is responsible for conducting elections to the Panchayat and municipality. So the elections of local government, that is Panchayat and municipality, are conducted by this the State Election Commission, whereas the election to the state legislature are concerned, no, State Election Commission is not responsible for conducting election. It is the Election Commission of India responsible for conducting election to the Legislative Assembly as well as Legislative Council. So this was the 13th unitary feature, and now the 14th and the last unitary feature is veto over state bills. Veto over state bills. Now what it means? See, few minutes ago I discussed about Article 200. Under Article 200, the governor has the power to reserve a bill for the consideration of the president. Under Article 200, there are 4 options available with governor. The first option is either governor give his assent to the bill. The second option is either governor withhold his assent to the bill. The third option is either governor return the bill for reconsideration. And the fourth option with the governor is to reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. So it is possible for the governor to reserve any bill for the consideration of the president. And whenever this happens, then all the decisions will be taken by the president on behalf of the central government. Okay, so I mean, I just said opposite to it. it is the central government that is going to take the decision that what should be done on the bill. It is only through the president that they communicate the decision to the state government. But yes, under Article 200, the governor has the authority to reserve any bill for the consideration of the president. Okay, so this was the these were the unitary features of the constitution, and now finally we are done with the federal and unitary features of the constitution, and now we can start with the new chapter, and the new chapter is emergency provisions. But remember, emergency provision is going to take multiple classes. I mean we cannot complete emergency provision in 1 or 2 classes. I mean it requires 3 or 4 classes. Why? Because in emergency provision we have to study 3 kinds of emergency, and the time consuming is the national emergency. Okay, so we are going to spend a lot of time in understanding the national emergency. So okay, so let us start with the new topic, and the new topic is emergency provisions. Emergency provisions. Okay, so first, starting from basics, emergency provision comes under which part of the constitution? It comes under part 18th of the constitution. And under part 18, how many articles are there dealing with emergency provision? It starts from article 352 till article 360. So under part 18th of the constitution, there are total how many articles? From article 352 to article 360. So these articles are related with emergency provisions. Now one more thing, from where we have borrowed emergency provisions? We all know that while framing the constitution we took inspiration from constitution of different countries, but the majority of the provisions borrowed in our constitution are from the Government of India Act 1935. That is why Government of India Act 1935 is rightly called as the blueprint of the Indian Constitution. So suppose this question comes in the examination, that which among the following is the blueprint of the Indian Constitution, then you should not be confused with the Constitution of UK or Constitution of USA. No, it is the Government of India Act 1935, made by the Britishers when they were ruling us. Okay, so we borrowed emergency provision from Government of India Act 1935. Now there is a confusion. I have seen at many places that there are many who are teaching that the emergency provisions have been borrowed from the Constitution of Germany. But the fact is, we have borrowed emergency provision from Government of India Act 1935. Now why there is a confusion between Government of India Act and Germany? Because see, we have borrowed from Germany, and that provision was suspension of fundamental right during national emergency. I will explain this under the effect of national emergency, that during national emergency our fundamental rights can be suspended. So this particular provision, that is the suspension of fundamental right during national emergency, has been borrowed from the Constitution of Germany, whereas the entire emergency provision chapter has been borrowed from the Government of India Act 1935. So remember this point, we have borrowed emergency provision from Government of India Act 1935. If you are still confused that whether I am correct or not, you can check this from M. Lakshmikant. Open the chapter Sources of the Constitution in M. Lakshmikant, whatever edition it is, and there you will find at the top Government of India Act 1935, and in front of Government of India Act 1935 you will find emergency provisions written, and in front of Germany you will find suspension of fundamental right during national emergency. You can cross check this by referring M. Lakshmikant. Okay. So emergency provision have been borrowed from Government of India Act 1935. Now moving on, how many emergencies are there in our constitution? So there are total 3 emergency. So the first emergency is under Article 352. The second emergency is under Article 356, and the third emergency is under Article 360. So there are total 3 emergencies. The first is national emergency, the second is president's rule, and the third is financial emergency. So we are going to discuss each emergency separately. Okay, so first we will start with Article 352, that is national emergency. So let us start Article 352. So the first is Article 352, and what is the name of Article 352? Now remember, Article 352 is popularly known as national emergency, but according to the Constitution, the actual name of Article 352 is proclamation of emergency. So the real name of Article 352 is proclamation of emergency. But we remember Article 352 as national emergency. So the popular name of Article 352 is national emergency. But national emergency is not used in the constitution. In place of national emergency, it is proclamation of emergency. So this was about the name of this emergency. And now how we will start the emergency? See, in order to understand any emergency, be it Article 352, 356 or 360, in order to understand emergency from examination perspective, we need to divide a particular emergency into 4 parts. So first we will discuss the reason that why national emergency is imposed. This will be the first part under any emergency. The second part will be that what is the procedure for imposing that emergency. So first we discussed why emergency is imposed, reasons for imposing the emergency. The second is the procedure to impose emergency. Then the third is how to stop that emergency, how to revoke emergency. And the fourth is the effect of that emergency. So in order to understand any emergency from examination perspective, you simply start dividing it into 4 parts. Reason for imposing, procedure for imposing, a procedure for revoking, and what happens during that emergency, the effect of emergency. So first we are going to start with that what are the reasons for imposing this emergency, that is national emergency. So let us understand the reason. So it is simple. According to the constitution, whenever there is a threat, then there will be emergency. I mean, the president can declare emergency if he thinks that there is a threat. Okay, so threat is the main reason for imposing national emergency. So let me write somewhere that why we impose national emergency, it is primarily because of threat. Whenever our country or any part of our country is under threat, then the president can declare or impose national emergency. So the main reason for imposing national emergency is the threat. Now, let me simplify it further, that what I mean when I say threat. Now listen, see, this is national emergency, and now we all know national emergency is imposed because of threat. Now, when it comes to threat can come from anywhere, either from within our country or from outside the country. So whenever the threat is coming from outside the country, we can call that threat as external threat. Okay, so now the threat is from outside the boundaries of India. Now the same threat can emanate from within the territories of India. So we can call that threat as internal threat. So national emergency is imposed because of threat, and threat is of 2 types. Either it is external threat or internal threat. Now whenever it is external threat, then we have to impose national emergency. It doesn't matter whether the threat is external or internal. If there is a threat, then we have to impose national emergency, and when the threat is external in nature, in that case, when national emergency will be imposed, then that national emergency will be called as external emergency. And whenever the national emergency is imposed because of internal threat, then in that case we call national emergency as internal emergency. So let me be clear, national emergency is of 2 types. First is external emergency, the second is internal emergency. What is the difference between these two? The difference is external emergency is imposed whenever the threat is coming from outside the territory of India, and internal emergency means whenever the threat is coming from inside the territory of India. So when I say threat is coming from outside, what it means, what it means when I say the threat is coming from outside the country. So here it means war. War is the ground and war is the threat for imposing national emergency. Now there is one more threat that is coming from outside, and that is external aggression. So remember, when I was saying the threat was coming from outside the country, the name of that threat was war and external aggression. And when I say the threat is coming from inside the country, then the name for that threat, earlier it was internal disturbances. Earlier it was internal disturbances. But Indira Gandhi imposed national emergency on this ground, and Indira Gandhi actually misused this word internal disturbances. She wants to silence the opposition, and because for silencing opposition, she misused this article. She misused internal disturbances. So she classified the protest done by the political parties as the internal disturbances. So the protest or the opposition from the different parties was declared as internal disturbances. So on the ground of internal disturbances, she arrested all the opposition party members. So this particular provision was misused by Indira Gandhi, and that is why when Morarji Desai came to power, he replaced internal disturbances with another word which was far more clear than the previous one. See what Morarji Desai did. Morarji Desai replaced internal disturbances with armed rebellion. Now why he did? See, internal disturbances is vague in nature. Vague means it is not clear. Internal disturbances. So for Indira Gandhi, internal disturbances was, okay, so for Indira Gandhi, internal disturbances was the protest by the opposition party member. For her, this was the internal disturbances. So it all depends upon the ruling government. What for the ruling government is internal disturbances. Okay, so Indira Gandhi misused this word, and that is why when Morarji Desai came to power, he decided to replace this word with a clear word, and it was armed rebellion. Now this word is far more clear than the previous one. Here it is clearly mentioned that these are rebellion and they are armed. Now how this was done? Now this was done by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978. Okay, Akshay, you are asking about the subscription. At present we do not have any subscription. Right now what you can do is to subscribe this channel. Okay, and after some time when we will launch the course, then you can join us, but there is no separate course or subscription. Okay, you can just subscribe this channel, and later on when we will launch the course, then you can purchase that course. Okay, so I hope this thing is clear, that why internal disturbances was replaced with armed rebellion, and how this was done. This was done by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978, and remember during this time it was the Janta government. So it can also be asked that during which government during which government internal disturbances was replaced with armed rebellion. So it was during the Janta government, and the Prime Minister was Morarji Desai. Okay, so I hope this thing is clear, and it is really important for examination. For your examination, this particular point is very important, that by which amendment the term internal disturbances was replaced with armed rebellion. So it was during it was by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978, and I hope this is clear, that why internal disturbances was replaced with this. One more thing, many times a student asks this question, so that how many times national emergency have been imposed. So national emergency has been imposed for 3 times, 2 times and once. Okay, now when, see, for the first time national emergency was imposed in 1962, it was October 1962, because of Chinese aggression. So China was the reason for imposing national emergency in 1962 October. Then the second national emergency was imposed in December 1971. This was because of Pakistan. And the third emergency, which we discussed right now, was imposed in June 1975, and this was because of internal disturbances. So this was imposed by Indira Gandhi. So the first 2 national emergency are external, while the third is internal in nature. Okay, so I think this is clear. And one more thing, while explaining this, let us also discuss that how long this emergency lasted. See, this emergency was imposed in 1962. This emergency continued for 6 years. So this emergency was revoked. That is, it was stopped in 1968. So this emergency was imposed in 1962, and it was revoked in 1968. And this emergency was imposed in 1971. Now, while this emergency was in operation, another emergency was imposed at the same time. Now the important question comes. This emergency was already in operation. Okay, this emergency was in operation and another emergency was imposed. So now the question comes, how come this is possible that 2 different national emergency are continuing at the same time? It is possible. It was by the 38th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1975. by the 38th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1975, it was possible for the government to impose different national emergency simultaneously if the national emergency is on different ground. And yes, these two national emergencies were on different ground. Why? This emergency was external in nature and this emergency was internal in nature. So it is possible to impose different national emergency on different grounds simultaneously. So at the same time, external emergency and internal emergency were in operation, and both the emergencies were revoked at the same time. That was March 1977. So it was in March 1977 when the government decided to revoke external as well as internal. But I hope you remember this point, that it is possible to impose two different national emergency at the same time if the ground is different. Okay, and this provision was added by 38th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1975. That was during the Indira Gandhi government. I hope we are done with that why national emergency is imposed. And one more thing that we have to remember, and it was when Indira Gandhi imposed national emergency, at that time Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed was the president of India. So Indira Gandhi, I think it was on the night of 24th June, or I don't know whether it was the intervening night of 24th, 25th June. So somewhat at that time, she said this to the President of India. Indira Gandhi said this to the President of India, that I have already discussed this with my minister. You kindly impose national emergency. See, now one more thing. Indira Gandhi misguided the President. Indira Gandhi never consulted her ministers. She decided on her own. Indira Gandhi straight away said this to the President, that you impose national emergency. I have already discussed this with my government, that is my ministers. And a national emergency was imposed on 25th of June 1975. And remember, and when the national emergency was imposed, no one knew about it. It was only Indira Gandhi when she declared this on All India Radio. So some people believe that it was Indira Gandhi who imposed national emergency. No, Prime Minister does not have the authority to impose national emergency. President has the authority to impose national emergency, but only on the advice of Prime Minister. So President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed immediately passed the order for imposing the national emergency, but no one knew except Indira Gandhi and her close friends. But it was Indira Gandhi who declared national emergency on All India Radio. She informed the entire country that the President has imposed national emergency on internal disturbances. Okay, so it was Indira Gandhi who communicated this to the entire country, that the emergency has been imposed by the President of India. And we consider internal emergency as the darkest phase or darkest hour of Indian democracy, because at that time the opposition, I mean those who were protesting against the government, were behind the bars in the name of security. Several laws were passed because of which those who were opposing the government were placed behind the bars. So this was the misuse of the constitution, this was the misuse of constitutional provision of the laws. Okay, there was also severe restrictions upon the freedom of press. Okay, so it's a long story. And in fact, during this emergency, Sanjay Gandhi, he was responsible for mass sterilization of lakhs of youth. Okay, lakhs of youth were forcefully sterilized. This happened during the Sanjay Gandhi, when he passed an order that in order to control the population of this country, we require mass sterilization, and the government employees were given the target to sterilize as many men they could. So many men were forcefully sterilized in the name of population control, and this all happened during the emergency. So opposition already experienced the kind of atrocities committed by the government, but at the same time the general public also experienced the kind of dictatorship that was prevalent at that time. So this was during Indira Gandhi era. But one more thing, you have to remember this, that we all know that Indira Gandhi, without consulting her ministers, she straight away said that you impose national emergency. So when Morarji Desai came to power, Morarji Desai, by 44th Amendment Act of 1978, inserted a provision under Article 352. So what was the provision? So under Article 352, a new provision was inserted, and as per this provision, the President can impose national emergency only on the written recommendation, only on the written recommendation of the cabinet. Now remember, this word is important, cabinet. Before the 44th Amendment Act, there were lakhs of words. I mean, there were more than 1.5 lakh words in Indian Constitution, but there was no word called cabinet. So we can rightly argue that the word cabinet was inserted in the Constitution by the 44th Amendment Act of 1978. And before this, there was no mention of the word cabinet in the Constitution. It was only about the Council of Ministers, not the cabinet. So by the 44th Amendment Act, Morarji Desai government made it clear that from now onwards, the President can impose national emergency only on the written recommendation of the cabinet. So what happens now, from now onwards? Suppose if our Prime Minister went to the President of India and said that you impose national emergency, I have already discussed this with my ministers, then this cannot happen. Now the President has an additional safeguard. Now what is the additional safeguard? The President can straight away say this to the Prime Minister that no, you first give me a written recommendation from the cabinet, and only then I will impose national emergency. So now it is not possible for the Prime Minister to take decision on his own, even without consulting his ministers. Okay, so this provision was inserted by 44th Amendment Act of 1978. Let me write it here. This provision was added by, see, with one amendment we can insert multiple provisions in the Constitution. So with this amendment we inserted armed rebellion, and with the same amendment we added a new provision, and that was President acting on the advice of cabinet in case of national emergency. So I think we are done with the reason for imposing national emergency. Now we can start with how to impose national emergency. See, as I said earlier, that there is a difference between what are the reasons for imposing national emergency and what is the procedure for imposing national emergency. Right now, what all we discussed falls under the first part, that is the reason for imposing national emergency. But the second part is how to impose national emergency. What will be the procedure for imposing national emergency? We all know President is the authority to impose national emergency, but it is not that simple that President said the emergency imposed and now this emergency will continue forever or so long the President desires. No, it doesn't work in that way. How it works? Let us see. So now we will write the procedure for imposition of national emergency. So now we will discuss the procedure for imposing national emergency. Okay, now listen to this. Now let me take an example. Let us take example, suppose on 1st of Jan 2026. This should be considered as an example. Okay, so suppose on 1st of Jan 2026, the cabinet ministers gave the written recommendation to the President that you please impose national emergency on the ground of war, external aggression or armed rebellion. It depends upon the cabinet minister. And one more thing, I forgot to mention this. It is possible for the government to impose national emergency on the whole country or even a part of it. Yes, it is possible to restrict the application of national emergency to a particular part of the country. This provision was added by 42nd Amendment Act 1976. So it was by the 42nd Amendment Act that we can restrict the national emergency to a particular part of the country. So whenever you hear national emergency, you should not be confused with this concept that national emergency means the entire country is under emergency. No, we can also apply or we can also impose national emergency on a particular part of the country. Okay, and this provision was added by 42nd Amendment 1976, passed during national emergency. Okay, So suppose on 1st of Jan 2026, Cabinet communicated its decision to the President that you please impose national emergency, and this was done in written. So on the written recommendation, the President imposed national emergency on this day. So whenever President imposed national emergency, from that day, within 2 months, the day national emergency is imposed by the President, from that day, within 2 months, the same emergency should be passed by Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. It is important that the same emergency should be passed by both the houses of parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. If this doesn't happen, then remember, emergency will cease to remain in force after 2 months. So can I argue that without the approval of parliament, national emergency cannot continue for more than 2 months? Okay, national emergency cannot continue for more than 2 months. So Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha needs to approve the national emergency, and this approval should be done by first of all, it was actually simple majority. By simple majority, both the houses should approve the emergency, but the fact is, by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, 2 months have been reduced to 1 month. Yes, during the Indira Gandhi government, it was 2 months. But it was by the 44th Amendment Act that the 2 months were reduced to 1 month. And earlier it was simple majority. It was by the 44th Amendment Act that the simple was replaced with special majority. So at present, if we have to approve the national emergency, then it is 1 month. Earlier it was 2 months. Now it is 1 month. So within 1 month, the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha both should approve national emergency by special majority. Earlier it was simple majority. And if this happens, suppose both the houses approves the national emergency, only then the national emergency will continue beyond 2 months. Suppose Lok Sabha said, yes, we approve the emergency, but Rajya Sabha denied. Then in that case, emergency is not going to continue. So for the continuation of national emergency beyond 2 months, the approval from both the houses of parliament is required. Okay. And suppose if both the houses approve the national emergency, then the national emergency will continue for only 6 months. So national emergency continues only for 6 months when it is approved by both the House of Parliament. And suppose 6 months are about to end, then we can follow the same procedure. The same procedure should be followed from both the houses, and if they approve, then again the national emergency will continue for 6 more months. So this procedure should be repeated after every 6 months, and like this we can impose national emergency, or we can keep on extending national emergency till indefinite period. So there is no maximum time period for imposing national emergency. National emergency can be imposed for indefinite period, subject to this condition that after every 6 months the approval from both the houses of parliament is required. Suppose after 1 year Lok Sabha said yes and Rajya Sabha said no, then sorry, the national emergency is not going to continue beyond that particular period. Okay, and one more thing, during the time of Indira Gandhi, there was no such provision of periodic approval. This is called as periodic approval of national emergency. After every 6 months you need approval of parliament. But remember, during Indira Gandhi government, there was no such provision of periodic approval of national emergency. If the national emergency is approved by the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, then the national emergency continues for indefinite period. There was no need to take approval from both the houses after every 6 months. So during Indira Gandhi government, what used to happen? At that time, once the national emergency is approved, then it will continue for indefinite period. No need to take approval from the parliament after every 6 months. No. But how this happened? Then again, 44th Amendment Act was responsible for this. So it was the 44th Amendment Act because of which periodic approval was inserted. 2 months were reduced to 1 month, and simple majority was replaced with a special majority. This all happened by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1971. So I hope you are clear. Now how the question will come in the examination. Suppose the question will be like this. Within how many months the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are required to approve the national emergency? Or another way, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are required to approve national emergency in how many months? And another question can be, what is the periodic approval for approving national emergency? So it is the 6 months. The other question, national emergency should be approved by which majority? It is the special majority. So if you remember this particular thing, then you can straight away answer that it is within 1 month the national emergency should be approved. After 6 months, periodic approval is required. Then both the house must approve the emergency, and it is the special majority. Okay, so we are finally done with the procedure for imposing national emergency. Now, what about the procedure for revoking national emergency? So now we will discuss the revocation of national emergency. Revocation basically means to stop national emergency. Now remember, there are two ways to stop national emergency. The first is the president. So the president can revoke national emergency at any time without the approval of parliament. See, when the national emergency is imposed, within 1 month you require the approval of parliament. But while stopping, there is no such concept of approval of parliament. We do not require the approval of parliament for revoking the national emergency. So the president, on the advice of prime minister, see, for imposing national emergency, he require the written recommendation of cabinet. So the written recommendation of cabinet is required only when the president is imposing national emergency. But while revoking the national emergency, there is no such requirement that the cabinet minister should give this in written. Okay, so the president without the parliamentary approval can revoke national emergency. But remember, president has no authority to revoke national emergency on his own. It is only on the advice of prime minister when he is revoking the national emergency. So on the advice of prime minister, he can revoke national emergency at any time. And remember, never think that what if prime minister said you revoke national emergency and president denied. No, this can never happen. If this happens, that prime minister is saying you please stop national emergency and president saying no, I'm not going to do this, then this falls under the violation of the constitution under article 61. So under article 61, we can impeach the president if he violates the constitution. And this is the clear-cut violation of the constitution if the president is trying to act on his own discretion. If he is trying to act in his own discretion, then yes, we can impeach him for the violation of the constitution. So the first is the president can revoke national emergency without the parliamentary approval, but obviously on the recommendation of prime minister. And the second, now remember the second way to revoke national emergency was added by 44th Amendment Act. So 44th Amendment Act added the second way to revoke national emergency, and that is if Lok Sabha passes a resolution for revoking national emergency by simple majority. Yes, only Lok Sabha has the power to pass a resolution for revoking national emergency. There is no role of Rajya Sabha in revoking national emergency. See, when it comes to approval, yes, Rajya Sabha plays an equal role. Okay, but when it comes to revocation, there is no role of Rajya Sabha. It is only about the Lok Sabha. So the first way is either the president, and the second way is Lok Sabha. If Lok Sabha passes a resolution for revocation of national emergency by simple majority, then the president is bound to revoke national emergency if the Lok Sabha passes the resolution by simple majority. Okay, now we can simply write that, see, at the time of approval of national emergency, both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha are required. But while revoking national emergency, while revocation of national emergency, only Lok Sabha is required. Second difference is, while approving the national emergency, we require a special majority. But while revoking, simple majority is required. Now you can compare the difference between the approval and revocation of national emergency. So I hope this table is clear. This this table is clear enough to show the difference between the approval and revocation of national emergency. Okay, so we are done with the three parts. The first was why national emergency is imposed. The second was what is the procedure to impose national emergency, and the third was how we can stop national emergency once it is imposed. Okay, so tomorrow we will start with the effects of national emergency, and that is again going to consume a time, because national emergency or any other emergency is time consuming except the financial emergency. Financial emergency will be completed in 15 to 20 minutes, but national emergency is time consuming. Same is the case with President's Rule. Okay. So tomorrow we will be discussing the effects of national emergency. So we will be continuing with this chapter. Tomorrow we will be continuing with this chapter, that is the emergency provision part 2, and we will be starting with the effects of national emergency, and then we will start with the President's Rule, that is Article 356. Okay. So goodbye everyone. I hope you enjoyed this session. Okay, and if you really enjoyed this session, you can subscribe this channel. Okay, so that you can get the notification. Okay, so thank you everyone.